Welcome back everyone to our short webinar. My name's Simon, I'm the founder of Horoma Studio. Today we'll do a video extensively tackling how to choose your tree cutout for your image. We've seen in the previous video why and when you should rely on 2D or 3D trees. Now we'll see which cutout or 3D model you should choose from your library depending on your image. We'll tackle each section one by one and finish this webinar with a small checklist that you should go through every time you encounter this situation. To show the issue at stake, we'll take a simple base rendering and assess each problem individually. Don't pay attention to the blending of the tree yet, because we're strictly talking about a tree cutout choice itself. So let's start. Here we have a nice rendering with the idea of adding two trees. One would be here, and the second one would be around here. So we'll see how we can come up with a right choice. The first thing you want to be careful with is the size. I'm not even talking about the composition size, I'm talking about the tree size compared to what you want it to look like. So because this tree here, for example, if you look at it, you know there's something weird with it, because the actual size of that tree should be more like this, or even more like this, because it's supposed to be a really big tree. So what you don't want to do is to downscale your trees so much that it looks really weird. The opposite is true as well. You don't want to take small trees and upscale them so much that they actually don't even look realistic and end up with huge leaves, which is something that doesn't really make sense. So that's the first thing you have to keep in mind. Another thing you have to want to look at is the type. What I'm referring to type is two things. It would be the season, basically. It doesn't make sense to have trees covered in snow in the middle of a sort of summerish or springish rendering. And the other thing is the geographical consistency. Here, if you know that you're dealing with a rendering that is say in Europe, it's going to be complicated to have, well, not Europe, but say like in Paris. It doesn't really make sense to have palm trees and other exotic trees in your image, because the thing is, these guys sort of gives idea, you're gonna see that on islands or really coastal areas. So this sort of brings ideas to the viewer that could be completely wrong compared with the actual geographical location of the project. So be careful not to use completely irrelevant tree species in your renderings. The other thing you want to have a look at is the foliage. The foliage density especially is that if you know that you want to be able to have a look at the image, have a look at the facade behind, you have to be careful that the foliage is not too dense. So you have to choose basically between something that is dense if you want to hide it, something that is completely much smaller so that you can see through, or you can go with bigger but with no foliage and just the branches. Although you have to be careful that this makes sense in terms of season, because you can't do a proper summer view with this sort of trees, because it doesn't make sense that it doesn't have all the leaves there. And also you have to make the consistent thing with you want to have leaves on the floor and things like that. So that's something to keep in mind. In terms of consistency too, if you tend to use trees, say winter trees, you want your cutouts to be dressed for winter, because if you have winter trees and all your cutouts people are in shorts and going to the beach, it's going to look weird. So be careful with that kind of consistency issue. In terms of lighting, this one is really straightforward, but here we have two trees, and one thing that should strike you is the sun direction, or the sun basically, because here you can see the cast shadows is going from the right to the left, whereas the cast shadows for these guys, the core shadow, is actually from the left to the right. So that means these guys are not oriented properly. Of course, it's easily tweakable, because you just have to change them from flip them horizontally Still, this guy here, you can see that he should be in the shadow completely. So that means you would have to adjust it a little bit more like that. Anyway, you get the idea. So lighting, something really important to double check. Another one that is a little bit more subtle is the perspective. For cutout trees, it's a bit easy to tweak, but here in this case, we have like an alignment of trees. And what you have to be careful with is that the actual perspective of this image matches the one of your rendering. So what you want to do is basically draw the line from the base and draw a line from the upper part of your tree so that you can find the perspective point. And what you need is to match it with the eyesight or the perspective point of your image so that it sort of looks real. Because otherwise, if I put it like that, that means it would be going upward, which is completely wrong. So that's something you have to keep in mind. That's it for the topics you have to keep in mind when choosing your tree. One thing I want to quickly show you is how much variety you can create from a single tree, because sometimes we tend to discard some cutout based on some criteria, whereas they could have easily been adjusted in post-production and therefore fit your scene perfectly. Here's a quick overview of how many different results you can get from a single tree by simply changing its hue, saturation, size, shape, masking some parts of it, or simply combining all these different adjustments. When choosing your cutout, you have to do that extra mental step to visualize to what extent you can tweak a cutout so that it could fit into your image. So, let's recap everything in a simple checklist that you can use for your next rendering. First thing is the type of the tree. Be careful to choose the right variety of trees according to the geographical location of your project. Second is perspective. Double check that the perspective you've cut out matches the perspective of your rendering. Third is the foliage. It has to match the season, the lighting, and the clothing of your people seen in the image. Be careful with stark contrast like summer people with winter-looking trees, or vice versa. 4 is the size of the tree cutout. You can downscale or upscale them to a certain extent in order to get variety, but you should be careful not to overdo it. The main point is the consistency. It encompasses all the aforementioned topics, the different varieties of the trees you use in the same image, the season, the cutout people, the lighting, etc. Everything has to look consistent in order to look realistic. That will be it for the checklist. Make sure to double check each item every time you're in the process of choosing trees. I'll see you in the next video dealing with the next big topic, composition. See you in the next video, guys. Cheers.